Welcome to the Caithness CPP. We are on time and we've got 2 hours in the diary. We do have 2 presentations this morning as well, so we'll try and get through the business as quickly and promptly as we can. Quickly and promptly are the same thing. I don't know why I said that. And hopefully come in inside the 2 hour mark. But we have allowed ourselves that time if we need it. Just to say that we are recording this as we did the last CPP. That's more for ease of note taking than anything else. And I think as with the last time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gail, transcription was posted on the CPP website.
The video goes up on the video. CPP website.
Yeah. So that will be the procedure again today. Just and unless anybody has any specific objections to that, there weren't any last time. If anybody does, then stick your hand up now. Good. Okay. We'll crack on. Gail, we have had a few apologies. Have you got a note of them?
I do. There's quite an extensive list, so what I'll do is add them to the notes if that's okay, Ian, rather than spending a whole heap of time going through them.
Good. Okay. That's fine. We'll have a quickly look at the actions, all of which I think are showing as complete. The one about meeting recordings was an action, so that's now complete, and we're going into our second recorded meeting. I also took an action from the last meeting to raise poverty, but particularly fuel poverty, at a Highland level, which I have done, and bless you, whoever that was, and we'll come back to that later on in the agenda when I talk about the Highland CPP. And I'm sure this will come up during the agenda as well, because it is very much on everybody's radar at the moment. Gail took an action to organise a meeting between me and Scott MacDonald from Police Scotland. Scott has taken over as the chair of the Sutherland Community Planning Partnership, and that has now happened. And Scott and I have spoken a couple of times, partly on fuel poverty, but in general terms as well, because we do have a lot of common issues between the two partnerships. And we are also, which I will come back to later on, we are also taking a similar approach to Sutherland in the sense that we are resourcing the partnerships from ground level here, but I'll talk about that later. So that's also complete. The other, I suppose, significant one is to clarify the situation with the child's plan. And Gail and Julie, I know you've spoken about that going forward. Julie, will you maybe say something about that on the agenda?
Yeah, certainly will.
Yeah, that's grand. And finally, Mac, who I don't think is here today, he's put his apologies in. Mac from Highland Council agreed to find a slot for me to come on to the local members ward business meeting, which I did. Thanks to Mac for that, and thanks to the members for listening to me. So myself and Alan took part in that call, which from my point of view I thought was very good and very constructive. Ron and Carl, you were, and Jan, I think you were all there at the meeting. It might be useful at some point to get your thoughts on how that went, because it was a conversation which also included other related topics. So if you've got any feedback during the meeting, then happy to get that. So those were the actions, and as I say, all of them are up to date. Anybody want to comment on any of them briefly before we move on? No? Okay, good. Right. In that case, we will go into presentations. The first of which is from Joan, from Thurso Community Development Trust, and that's on the North Highlands and Islands Climate Action Hub. So, Joan, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, can I share screen if I've got permission to do that?
Yes, you should have permission to do that, yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
That's good. I can see that. Is everybody else seeing that okay?
Oh, is it coming up in presenter view? So you're seeing my notes on it as well?
No, it's in presenter mode.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. So, different hat on, North Highlands and Islands Climate Hub, rather than Thurso Community Development Trust. I think some of you have kind of heard us speaking before, so the first bit of this, I'm just going to kind of whiz through a little bit to explain just a little bit more about what the hub is. And also this, that a lot of our communities are already doing climate action, but they maybe don't realise that they're doing climate action. I've actually just come back from the DTAS conference, and Michael Cook, who's the CEO of Circular Communities Scotland, made very clearly, I'm just going to absolutely pinch what he said for all of my presentations now, is that in terms of the climate crisis, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is we're all the problem. The good news is we're all the solution. So it's kind of looking at what we can do and where we are with community needs, but I'll run a little bit through this. So what's the Climate Hub, first of all? We are Scottish Government funded for 3 years. The Scottish Government is building a network of hubs across Scotland. So far there is the North Highlands and Islands Climate Hub, and there's also the Nescan Hub, who are operating in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. There are another couple of hubs that are due to come online before the end of this financial year, and then the Scottish Government is currently seeking applications for the rest of the hubs to go through. The aim for all of the hubs is that they're community owned and that they're community led. So we first started off that it was actually Thurso Community Development Trust that received the award to operate the hub. And that was based on, well, let's be honest, most of you know me, it was based on a little bit of a rant that I had about combining community needs, solving inequalities and climate action, and how all of the things need to work together rather than in isolation from each other. But it was also partly because there was a recognition of the levels of community engagement that Thurso Community Development Trust has been able to achieve over the 4 years that we've been operating. And that's why it came to us. All of the other hubs, it will be a community organisation or a community network that will take on the operating of them. The Scottish Government have seen it to be really important that it is something that's coming from grassroots level. So, like I said, I had that little bit of a rant. So in terms of what is the Climate Hub, it's about connecting community needs with climate action. We obviously have a huge amount to do to reach a transition to net zero. Within our communities, community groups, community organisations, they're the community leads. They're the influencers. You know, if we think about, we tend to think about influencers as Instagram influencers, but actually all of us who are working within communities, we are influencers within our community. And if we can set an example, if we can create a greater circular economy, but also a lot of the issues that we talk about within our communities, the needs that our communities have, are very linked to solutions that climate action can give them. So where we've got togetherness and mental well-being, that's community growing. I mean, we run a community growing project here in Thurso. Would I say that the main aim of that is what we're growing? No, it's not. It's reducing the social isolation and people being able to come together in that garden space. Similar with active travel, improved green spaces, they all have an impact on people feeling together, reducing social isolation and mental well-being. Food and fuel insecurity, never more important than what they are at the moment. Influencing most of the discussions that we're having and most of the fears that are within our communities. And things like community larders, again, community growing, local food systems can help to provide solutions to that, as well as looking at energy efficiency, community renewable energy, and renewable heating systems. And then connected and equitable. So we're just like making people that they're all on that level playing field. So things like repair cafes, bike sheds, tool libraries. It's not a matter of whether you can afford to buy a tool or not buy a tool for your house. You're actually taking climate action. And that's one of the principles as well towards community larders is that there's no referral process. It's there to reduce food waste within a community. So it doesn't make somebody feel more crap than they already feel if they're having to access food support. So a lot of our groups are doing climate action and they don't realise that they're doing climate action. We hear this again and again. It's like, oh, I don't think I'm doing anything to do with climate. But actually, if you're doing a walking, a green health walk, you're doing climate action, you're getting people out in the outdoors and they're appreciating nature, they're slowing down. If you're doing a cycling project, that's climate action because you're taking them off the road, you're giving them an alternative. Electric vehicles, there's quite a few communities in Highland that have got e-cars now. They're using them because it's a cost efficient way of using a car once they've got the funding for it, and then they're using it primarily to shuttle people backwards and forwards to maybe hospital appointments in Raigmore. But they're taking climate action. They've got a, Go Golspie is a fantastic example of it. They've got a car there that's very clearly an e-car, and they're using it to take people up and down to the hospital for appointments and things like that. But it's setting an example within a community of what an e-car can do. Influencing car sharing. I would actually argue that influencing car sharing would also help to combat social isolation for some people as well. Public transport, we've got community transport projects. And again, maybe you're not thinking that you're taking climate action, but you are taking climate action. Then also we've got things like growing food, gardening, composting, buying local produce, reducing waste. All of those things, again, are climate action. And all of those, particularly to the third sector, are things that quite often come as, especially that reducing waste. We're very good at recycling things into other things and not spending terribly much money. Community growing projects, we've got community growing projects springing up. That's been one of the main trends since COVID. And we've got groups all over Caithness who are looking to do community growing. And we can see all of the health and wellbeing benefits of it, but it's also creating a resilient local food system as well. And then we've got everything to do with the circular economy. Also, things that we're very good at doing in the third sector. So repairing, recycling, reducing. We've got clothes swaps. We've got community larders. We've got projects, even just crafting projects where you're taking something old and you're making it into something that's usable again. All of which are examples of climate action projects, but we don't always think that they're climate action projects. So what we are here to do is to support in any of these type of projects that you want to do, but there's also more than that that's climate action, which is also adaptation and resilience. So we are currently doing quite a lot of work in the Golspie community, because Golspie is a community that is subject to flooding and also rising sea levels. And that's looking at how they need to adapt. We work also very closely with Highland Adapts, who Keith might speak a little bit more about. But Highland Adapts is looking at doing climate risk assessments for Highland. We can already see climate change happen. Look at this summer, how hot it's been, and now how wet it has been. We need to also look at supporting communities and doing things. How is climate change going to influence their local place plans? How is extreme weather, flooding, the energy issues that we're experiencing, how can they be solved by taking some climate action within communities as well? And then when communities are looking at developing something, I mean, what are going to be the anticipated climate risks to that? So there is quite a lot to do with, it's not just taking climate action, not just thinking about having a repair library. Like, we're there to support to the extent of assisting the local place plans and climate proofing these kind of place plans, which is some of the work that we've been doing within other communities as well. So that leads me on into what is the Climate Hub. So we are there to support any projects currently throughout the North Highlands and Islands, but we don't, there is no other hub for the rest of Highland, so we unofficially cover the rest of Highland. We're there to provide support and design, development and delivery of projects. Now, that can mean that we signpost to somebody else. So if a new group came along to us and they said they want to do a climate action project in their community, we'd start saying to them, well, are you constituted yet? What policies you've got in place, and we would refer them onto the third sector. There's our third sector interface, that we're not there to duplicate anything that's going on, but we're really there to provide that kind of signposting. The climate landscape in terms of support from various different agencies and organisations is very cluttered. I mean, I could start listing them: Circular Community Scotland, Zero Waste Scotland. There's a lot of different agencies operating within it, and so our development officers can help get people to the right place that they need to go to. We're also there to encourage collaboration. One of the reasons for these climate hubs was a recognition that the Climate Challenge Fund didn't encourage, which had been the main source of funding via the Scottish Government for climate action projects, was that it didn't encourage groups to work together. So we are here to encourage groups to work together, which is things that we've seen already. Like, I've worked with a couple of groups in Sutherland where one is looking to do create a woolen mill and do things with waste wool, and we've got another one who's looking to do composting from waste wool, but we join them together. So the stuff that the woolen mill really can't use, then the ones that are doing the composting, they can use. We're there to educate, so to help with carbon literacy. We've got carbon literacy training available. We've also got training that is available for community groups to do their own net zero and environmental policies. We're obviously there to celebrate the work that's going on in communities and to emphasise the work that's going on in communities. The Highland Climate Festival was one of the tools that we've done to do that. Capacity build, where a group maybe just doesn't have the capacity to do something, then we have development officers that can step in to help and to empower that community group to be able to deliver what they're looking to do from the climate angle. We're also the voice to government. This is actually this photo here with Drew Hendry, which I specifically used for the voice for government. We currently have the ear of the Scottish Government because we're one of the first 2 climate hubs. And the Scottish Government is looking to shape policies to do with climate action, and we do have the voice of them. This was actually a photo that was taken at an event. One of our development officers stepped in to do with Crown Connects in Inverness, to do with local place planning. But we have that feed in there where we can help to shape what's going forwards. We also have little bits of funding that's available. We've got some seed funding that's available. Groups can join as a member of the hub, so our help is not limited to being a member of the hub. It's free of charge for groups to join. There's no we just want to see communities doing climate action. It also, membership of the hub gives access to various climate action resources, also networking and collaboration. We plan to start hosting quite a lot of members events that we can discuss things. And I mean, who could resist all these shiny, happy faces here? Encouraging collaboration, also access to the festival funding and dedicated support and regular updates, but it's not confined to membership. What we would like to see is that groups are joining as members of the hub because they're saying, okay, we're gonna take some climate action, and that's they're almost putting that stamp on it. We've got development funding that's available of up to £500. So projects must be based in the Highlands or the Northern Isles, and that it's there for developing climate action project in the local community. What we also provide, as well as that funding support, is that a development officer can also step in and help. The example was that event that we did at Crown Connects in Inverness. Was they received probably 3 times as much in-kind support as what they did for the actual funding award that they had of £500. And then I think that's me, unless there's any questions.
That's great, Joan. Thank you very much. I wonder, rather than take questions now, I wonder, once Keith has had a chance to speak, whether we could come back and ask questions on both presentations, given that they are likely to be linked. If that's okay with everybody, as long as you can retain your question to the end of Keith's presentation. Keith, would you like to take over?
Yep, can do. Thanks, Ian. Just give me 2 secs. Can everyone see that okay?
Sorry, just to say to everybody, Keith is HIE's net zero transition lead and ex-Highland Council.
Thanks very much, Ian, and yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you all. So thanks to Gail and Ian for that chance. As Ian's just said, I'm Keith Masson. I'm head of Net Zero Transition at Islands and Islands Enterprise, and I joined HI back in February, having spent quite a few years managing the climate change and energy team at the Highland Council. But today I'm going to give a quick overview of what HI's role in the net zero space is, whilst maybe having a look at some of the regional opportunities and challenges which will be presented over the coming months and years. years. And please feel free to jump in at any point if you do have any questions or issues. But just to begin with, I'm sure you're all pretty well aware of what HI's role and function is, so I'll not dwell on this slide for too long. But I do think it's important, just for context, to remember that we're here as an organisation to provide help and support to the businesses and the communities of our areas, to help them grow and to thrive and to be resilient. And I'll touch on in each of those aims throughout the presentation. But as I'm sure you're all acutely aware, there's now widespread understanding and consensus that human activities, and predominantly the burning of fossil fuels, is emitting huge quantities of carbon into the atmosphere. That carbon stays there for decades and stops heat escaping and leads to continuously increasing temperatures. Now Scotland recognised that threat fairly early on compared to most countries, and to put us at the forefront of action, the Scottish Government passed the Climate Change Scotland Act back in 2009, and that's now created a legally binding target for us to end our contribution to climate change no later than 2045. But I think it's fair to say if we don't get a handle on global emissions and temperatures continue to rise at the rate that they have been, that increase in heat is going to drive change across Highlands and Islands, and Joan's already touched on it. You know, we're going to see regional and seasonal extremes in weather, temperatures. We're going to see sea level rise, reduced snow cover, which has impacts our tourism sector, intensification of heavy rainfall, and changes and destruction of habitats and ranges for plants and animals. And those will all, in some way, shape or form, affect us all significantly. But just on this slide, interestingly, just after I started my new job at HI, I presented to the HI leadership team on the extreme temperatures which were being experienced in the Indian subcontinent at the time, which were made about 30 times more likely because of human-caused climate change. Now, some of the temperatures that were being experienced there at that time were at the very limits of what humans can actually survive. And I made the point that if we didn't get a handle on global emissions, we'd start to see temperatures like that happen in the UK. Needless to say, my assessment was overly optimistic, because we saw something akin to what happened in the Indian subcontinent in England a mere 4 months later. And for me, that's pretty terrifying. And I think it starts to reframe the climate change discussion, in that we're not only going to need to focus on significant and rapid reduction in emissions, but also the need to massively scale up our adaptation and resilience response, which Joan has really well elucidated earlier on. So from HI's perspective, and in the same vein as the Highland Council and all other public sector bodies, we've got a number of duties under the Climate Change Scotland Act, which I'll set out briefly. So as a public body with significant spending power, we've got to actively support the achievement of the 2045 target to end our national contribution to net zero, national contribution to climate change, sorry. And that means in very basic terms that we've got to accurately assess all of the activity that we undertake in the delivery of our services that result in carbon emissions, and then develop plans and actions to reduce them as close to zero as possible, no later than 2045. And that's a major part of my job over the coming months and years. And a lot of it, thankfully, is pretty straightforward. For example, we need to improve the fabric of our premises to make them more thermally efficient, and then convert a lot of our heating systems over to renewables. But a lot of it's an awful lot trickier than that. For example, what are we going to do in terms of our staff travel, our commuting behaviours, our commercial property portfolio? For us, as well as the business community and the communities of the Highlands and Islands more generally, it's going to be an iterative process. We're not going to get to net zero overnight, and there's going to be an awful lot of shared learning over the way. So what we want to do is make sure that HI is at the forefront and walking the walk in terms of net zero. So if we're credible in our approach, that'll help us in terms of liaison with the businesses that we support, as well as the communities that rely on us and the Highland Council and other public sector bodies as well. So if I do my job properly, there won't really be a need for a head of net zero transition at HI in 4 or 5 years' time. It'll be woven throughout everything that we do and deliver by that stage. So whilst there's quite a lot of work to do in our own net zero journey, I think it's fair to say the Highlands and Islands has an opportunity to really disproportionately contribute to the national net zero ambition. And we've got a critical role as the enterprise agency for the north of Scotland to play in maximising on that opportunity. One of the biggest and most important economic opportunities for the Highlands and Islands is renewable energy, and principally the 25 gigawatts of new offshore wind developments, which was announced under the ScotWind 2 leasing round earlier this year. Now, the inclusion of large floating wind developments in that round is going to make Scotland a world leader in the development of floating wind. And having a significant proportion of those projects in the Highlands and Islands waters emphasises the natural advantages of our region, which will firmly be at the forefront of global offshore wind development. And as a result, I think we can expect a number of new highly skilled offshore wind related jobs to be created in many of our more remote and rural and island communities. And we believe that the economic impacts of the offshore wind industry will be along similar lines to what we saw 40 years ago with the oil and gas boom, and will really help to create the conditions for a just transition to net zero for both the Highlands and the islands. I think the sheer scale of the opportunity is going to accelerate the development of our industries in the future, such as green hydrogen production, which I'll touch on shortly, from offshore wind, and that will create further new green fair jobs in our island and coastal communities. And at High, we've got a dedicated energy transition and net zero team, which is a number of roles which are principally focused on maximising the benefit of this opportunity to the businesses and the communities of the region. Obviously, the scale of what is being proposed is enormous, and it's going to come with a multitude of challenges. But we've got a really critical role to try and maximise that and really benefit from it and create jobs for life, because they truly are there if the young people of today want them. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, and I've kind of touched on it already, that there's no credible pathway to net zero without massive expansion of renewables. It's just a simple fact. And the scale of renewable electricity required to decarbonise heat, to decarbonise transport and industry is absolutely vast. But with that comes enormous opportunities, with green hydrogen just about peeking over the horizon now. And when we look 10 years into the future, it's now nearly impossible to envisage an energy system under which hydrogen isn't playing a massive role. As the Enterprise Agency, we've got a critical role to make sure that we maximise that. As I mentioned earlier, and I'll just touch on this slide briefly, the ScotWind leasing round just shows the scale of opportunity, not just for the Highlands and Islands region, but the number of offshore wind developments that are likely to happen off the Caithness coast. We were expecting 10 gigawatts to be announced earlier in the year, but it was 25, with another 3 recently added through the NE1 clearing round up in Shetland. So it's phenomenally ambitious and exciting, not just for Scotland, but the whole of, not just for Highlands and Islands, sorry, but for the whole of Scotland. The scale of ScotWind 2 and the associated challenges of the electricity transmission network do create a clear opportunity for green hydrogen production. This isn't an energy vector of the distant future. We're anticipating the first commercial production of green hydrogen in Highland, in Inverness, actually within the next 2 years. And a company have already signed a deal to develop a hydrogen production and storage facility within the city. And the principal aim in the first instance is to decarbonise commercial transport from Inverness out. And that company recognised that Highland really lends itself to green hydrogen as the most cost-effective, clean fuel solution for rail and commercial transport, and are aiming to develop a network of hydrogen hubs across the region. And they're one of many. The investment that's going to flow into the region in terms of hydrogen and offshore wind is going to be massive. So we've touched on some of the macro level opportunities the transition to net zero is going to bring to the Highlands and Islands, but the rest of the presentation will have a look at what the climate agenda means for the small business community principally, and what role High is going to play in supporting them over the coming years. Just for context, and I'm sure you're all aware, the vast majority of businesses in the Highlands and Islands region are either SMEs or micro businesses. And every quarter we survey our business panel, which is a statistically representative sample of our business community, just to understand views across a range of different topics, including confidence in the economy, attitudes towards climate change, etc. And that helps to inform our support and to understand where focus needs to be directed. And although I'm fairly new to High, it's become clear quite quickly that one of the critical challenges in terms of supporting the SME community to better address the climate emergency is carbon literacy. Most of our businesses, I think at a high level at least, understand what climate change is and what they need to do, or that they need to do something about it, but they struggle when it comes to the basics. And very few, around 1 in 10, have actually taken that essential first step towards transitioning to net zero, and that involves understanding their carbon footprint. And for me, having worked in carbon management for nearly 10 years, it's impossible to do strategy well if you don't understand where you are. So that's got to be a critical focus. How can we make it easier for the businesses to baseline their emissions and then use that data to help them develop their strategy and attract funding to transition to net zero? But whilst there are very few businesses actively measuring their footprint, there are a number who are actively taking action to reduce their emissions, and that's fantastic. But, and I must apologise for sounding a bit like a stuck record, taking action in the absence of accurate monitoring is missing such a good opportunity. Businesses, as well as the public sector, often erroneously think that doing the right thing in terms of climate change is going to cost them money, but the opposite's often true. Every tonne of carbon emitted to the atmosphere has an associated cost. So it therefore follows that every tonne that we don't emit has a financial benefit to the business. And given the current cost of energy crisis, we need to go big on that message and help businesses understand that taking action now and measuring impact will help improve current and future viability. Just on the energy crisis, I think it's obviously the main issue and concern of the day, and there's no getting away from the fact that the cost of business is escalating rapidly. That's putting a lot of pressure on a number of sectors, but for our region in particular, that's having huge impact on manufacturing, tourism and social enterprises. We're currently developing our package of support around the energy crisis, working with partners wherever possible, including Business Energy Scotland, to direct and provide the right levels of support and guidance to the business community, as well as helping them to draw down the money that will help improve premises and not just protect against immediate price volatility, but build net zero resilience into the medium and the longer term. We've also recently updated the net zero pages of the HIE website, which I'll send on these slides to Ian for circulation after the meeting today, so that you can access those. But it's very much a moving picture at the moment, and our package of support is going to change and develop over time. But we do recognise the clear and immediate need to support the business community. Nearly done, but this slide I think summarises the perceived challenges of shifting towards net zero for businesses. And my key takeaway from this slide is the depressing reality that almost half of our businesses are facing more pressing priorities than climate change. And in fairness, whilst that's frustrating for me as a practitioner, it's understandable why so many are in that position. The energy crisis, Brexit, supply chain issues and challenges with the labour market are all causing massive headaches on a daily basis, so they just don't simply have the bandwidth to adequately prepare for climate change mitigation or adaptation. But from my perspective, it's not a can that can be kicked down the road in perpetuity. Businesses who don't actively engage with net zero are actively hurting their future viability in many ways, because consumers are increasingly demanding credible and science-based approaches to decarbonising products and services. And we only need to look at the whisky industry as a case in point. They've looked 10, 20, 25 years in the future and recognise that what they're putting in casks now will be viewed in a completely different way by their consumers when it comes to being bottled. So they're heavily investing in decarbonising operations now, also looking to source organic and locally produced barley, which is nudging the agricultural community in a positive way too. So I like to think of net zero as being quite similar to the digital transformation which happened 20 years ago, and the businesses who didn't engage with that are generally not around now, and I think that the same is likely to be true of net zero. And Joan's already touched on this, so I won't dwell on it, but in a perverse way, one of the ways to really capture the attention, I think, of the business community and communities more general is to frame the conversation less around net zero, but more around climate risk. Most businesses have a fairly good grasp of the main risks and challenges to their immediate viability and like to plan to help avoid those wherever possible. But if you ask the question, for example, of where your business is going to be in 2050, and they go away, do a bit of research and come back stony-faced to tell you it's going to be underwater, they quite rightly start to take the whole agenda a bit more seriously. Now, that's an extreme example, but whether we like it or not, coastal regions like the Highlands and Islands are going to experience a great deal of challenge and change, even if we get to net zero. So it's therefore critical that all sectors come together, take a place-based partnership approach to address climate risk. And one of the key initiatives, which is trying to make that a reality in Highland, is Highland Adapts, which Joan has already touched on, but I do think it's a critical mechanism in the preparedness and the risk and opportunity assessment that will be required. So just finally, I'm not quite old enough to remember the establishment of Highlands and Islands Development Board, which is now HIE, nor the oil boom of the 70s, but I've lived through some fairly major economic shifts, the largest and most seismic of which from a societal and economic perspective, I think, has been telecoms infrastructure and the shift to digital. And in some ways, it's unbelievable, given how much it's changed the tech landscape. But 20 years ago, when I was studying in Glasgow, the Apple iPhone was still 5 years away. most people still communicated by calling each other or sending each other text messages limited to 160 characters in an old Nokia 3210 or equivalent. And social media wasn't even really a thing, although Bebo was perhaps just around the corner. And whilst it's a completely different beast, I think net zero and its associated industries will be the next major shift in the economy. As already reflected, businesses will either embrace it or find survival increasingly challenging. And for me, it's a no-brainer. And for a region like Highlands and Islands, which is so blessed with natural resources and capital, getting on the bandwagon at an early stage is not only attractive, it's essential. And so that's really my mission in my job at High, is to help the Highlands and Islands to be the net zero equivalent of an Apple and not a Nokia. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Keith. Hands up who remembers when Bebo was a thing, eh? Yeah. Or hands up who's prepared to admit when they, yeah. That was really good. And the clear thread running through both presentations. And I think you're absolutely right, Keith. I think it is always useful to pause and look at where we are. But I think the really powerful bit of both of those is that there is no better time for us to be stopping and thinking, what is our impact? And particularly with the whatever you want to call it, but the kind of gathering storm of the energy crisis, what are not just our impacts, but what mitigations we can either influence or begin to adopt ourselves. So yeah, really powerful stuff. I'm going to open it up to questions for both presentations. I had one myself, but I'll open it up. I think if I've got the order right, it was Katie first and then Ron.
Thanks, Hume. I actually just wanted to thank you both, and also for you know, to the CPP for actually putting together the having climate change on the agenda, so and featuring so prominently for today. I think it's great, and as has already been mentioned, I think it really reflects where a lot of people's heads are at the moment, not just in a wider context, but also in terms of their own local spheres and you know, organisations, or in my respect, organisations and clubs. I would be keen to link up with you both, I think, and potentially see if I can put something out. We've got a new South Highland Hub officer now as well. If we see if we can actually organise something online, which we can link the whole of the North Highland Community Sport Hub network as well as the South, also linking with wider community groups as well, and actually have something quite targeted around the anxiety that a lot of people are feeling going into winter in Highland, and provide you know, really some thought-provoking information around what can be done at that local level, and link those with projects that are going on the ground, because I know there are many that would link in with this. So just to say thank you, and I'll be in touch.
That's brilliant, Katie. Thank you. And that for me is a perfect illustration of what CPP is here to promote. So thanks for that, Ron.
Yeah, thank you for both for very good presentations. It certainly gets the message home. It's just when you were saying that in a few years' time, a few places will be underwater. So thank God I live at the top of a hill. Keith, I had a question for you. It's a sort of practical kind of question. Great difficulty trying to get tradesmen. And I was just wondering, are there enough businesses that, you know, if people want to move to air source pumps, etc., are there enough businesses in the area to accommodate that? Because I know it's great difficulty trying to get tradesmen, you know. That was just the sort of question. Or if there any support for that businesses, you know, that type of thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think that the scale of the transition is going to need an awful lot more boots on the ground in terms of retrofit of both, commercial and residential properties. There are a number of businesses who are pivoting towards renewable heat across the region, recognising the opportunity. But as I'm sure you're aware, there is a major gap in terms of, availability of folk and availability of training to deliver at the scale that is required. So I think if you want to do it, if you want to get, an air source heat pump or renewable system, there are definitely providers out there. And one of the big challenges, though, is I think the step that's maybe needed before that. Many of the houses and the buildings across the region, to benefit properly from renewable energy, is going to need a massive retrofit program to improve thermal efficiency in the first instance, and that's maybe where there's an even bigger gap. But hopefully, looking ahead, that's being recognised increasingly going forward. That the insulation and making sure that you're capturing the value of investment is absolutely essential in this transition, not just for homeowners and businesses, but for the public sector at large as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. And yeah, I agree, Keith. And I think there's a whole just transition element to this, which is in areas like ours even more starkly obvious than it would be elsewhere. And some of us were involved when Richard Lockhead, the minister, came up to Thurso last week to talk specifically about just transition, and we're pursuing an opportunity to bring the Just Transition Commission up to Caithness to illustrate the impact on the ground and how this could work to our benefit. Alexander, you've got your hand up.
Yes, yes. Thank you as always for the two presentations. It was just something in continuation from Ron, what Ron said there. Something just occurred to me because I have memories of discussing with various renewable presentations just how well the supply chain is up here. There may be individual specialties of installing a certain item which is lacking, but the supply chain is marvelously well structured, both with heavy construction, with batteries, with the potential for green hydrogen as well. Another conversation I had a few months ago with a scaffolder. He was asking if wind farms or renewable firms could provide specialist training for residents within the benefit areas. I don't know if that's being looked into, but is that something that dialogue that you could enter with the wind farm administrators?
If Trudy Morris was here from the Caithness Chamber, she would probably be saying that conversation has already started. And I think from a North Highland College UHI perspective, Debbie Murray would be saying the same thing. So you're absolutely right, Alexander, and I think that's Ron's point as well. So there is an opportunity for us to close the gap, if there is a gap, between our existing supply chain skills and some of those opportunities. Okay. A couple of points kind of occurred to me. I'll come to you in a sec, Joan. In fact, I'll tell you what, Joan, you go first.
I was just also going to say in that, I mean, I've just come back from the DTAS conference, so I'm full of bright ideas. And I mean, two of the groups that spoke there was Glasgow Community Energy. They have been setting up solar panels on the top of school roofs. Another group that spoke there was, I'm going to forget what their name is, but they're a group that's based in England who are doing deep retrofitting, a community organisation that's operating as a social enterprise, who are doing deep retrofitting to houses in the northwest region of England. There are opportunities out there for community organisations to take on some of this work, or to drive some of this work happening in our communities, because the scale is just incredible. Yeah. And I also know that there are funders out there, from conversations that I have with funders, that they are looking towards communities to start looking at funding these kind of skills gaps.
That's really good, and I think you're absolutely right. I think unless we're coming forward with propositions on how those gaps can be filled, then we'll go round in circles to some extent. Thanks, Joan. A couple of things I was going to say, following at the end of Keith's presentation. Keith mentioned that HIE is going through a process of effectively re-evaluating existing tools that we have in our box in terms of support, which is absolutely the case. And he mentioned the word pivot, and we are looking at how we might pivot some of our tools and resources to address some of the short-term challenges in terms of the energy crisis. We used the word pivot in the very early days of the COVID pandemic, in the sense that we felt there were pivotal companies, businesses that we absolutely had to ensure we invested in very early on, because there was a real danger that people were simply going to go out of business. It feels like we are moving along similar lines, but the difference at the moment is that we don't have a wider context. We don't yet know what the government response to the energy crisis will be. It might be, we might know by the end of this week things that we didn't know yesterday. But at the moment, it does feel like we are yet to come forward with something that fits into that context. But Keith's absolutely right. We are already looking at how we might pivot to meet that challenge. Sorry, Katie, you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you. It was just something that occurred to me off the back of what you were just saying there about the skills gap. I don't know if everyone else is aware. So through the community sport hubs, I link up with other services, and one of those is leadership, the leadership programme. And we have actually just started a green health leadership programme, and we're looking for partners in local areas to link with and be able to work with as part of that. So if there are any people in the call today who that would be of interest to, please do get in touch with me. I'm going to be speaking to Elizabeth McDonald, who runs the leadership programme for High Life Highland, because I think there's an opportunity there to make those links with young people from 13 to 26 who are actually looking to get into the renewable energy sector or into projects that have an impact basically on climate change, because at the end of the day it's a topic that's very relevant to them.
Excellent, thanks Katie. Okay, and anybody else got questions for either of our two presenters? Gail.
Mine's not really a question, it's more of a, Keith, if it's okay with you, I'm going to link you with an organisation called Changeworks. At an area team level, we are supporting a piece of research about the drivers and barriers to fuel poverty and extreme fuel poverty, and using Caithness and Sutherland as a specific example. So they are tasked with identifying potential solutions. I don't know what any of those are going to look like, but I think it would be really useful for them to have a conversation with you just in terms of the offshore wind developments, that you talked about earlier, because I think at a local level in Sutherland and Caithness poverty groups, we recognise that the impact of the prices that we pay in this area are far higher than the rest of Scotland and rural Scotland. So just to say, I'm going to point them in your direction once that project gets underway, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. That's the second time Changeworks have come up today, Gail. So that's serendipitous.
Good.
Perfect.
Excellent. And that might also act as a segue into our next agenda item. So if nobody else, Alexander, you're either Spider-Man or you're, oh, there you go. You're the right way up again. It's okay. Our next agenda item, which is really just an update from me on the Highland Community Planning Partnership. And we thought we would do it this way around on the agenda. I usually update at the end of our meetings about the Highland Community Planning Partnership, but I'll do it at the start because I think it probably will lead us into other conversations further down the agenda. So first of all, thanks to Keith and Joan for those two presentations. You are more than welcome to remain on the call, but if you don't want to remain, we will officially release you back into whatever it is you're going to go on and do. But either way, happy to have you on board or not. Okay. So Highland CPP wise, the Highland CPP meets this Friday actually. So today is quite useful for us because it'll be a useful set of information for us to feed into the Highland group on Friday. Friday will be the first meeting that Hi will have chaired. So the chair rotates for the Highland Community Planning Board. Hi has just taken that on for the next 2 years. So our Chief Exec, Stuart Black, will chair the Highland Board on Friday. Stuart and I have been talking particularly to Highland Council, about some of the issues that we've just been speaking about, largely around the energy crisis. We are acutely aware that it's not just the CPP board that meets in the coming 2 or 3 weeks, but we also have the Regional Economic Partnership for the Highlands and Islands, and we also have the Convention of the Highlands and Islands. All of those meet in the next 3 weeks. And what we are trying to do is to put together a descriptor of the impact or impacts of the energy crisis in the Highland area, which will look and feel different to other areas of Scotland. And that's partially based on our reliance on oil-fueled heating, not being on the gas grid, lots of factors which make us a slightly different proposition to other areas, and particularly more urban areas of Scotland. So that work is ongoing at the moment. We will probably have a short presentation of that on Friday. It will in part be informed by some recent work that Shetland have done, Shetland Island Council. If you haven't seen that, we'll make sure that the document that they produced is circulated after the call. The statistic that came out of that, which you may have seen in the press, is that based on current projections, 96% of the Shetland population will be in fuel poverty this winter, which is staggering. But you know, the question that we're openly asking ourselves in a Highland context is, what does that look like here? I suspect as it stands at the moment, we don't quite know, but I suspect it's a very high percentage. So we're hoping to illustrate that, because ultimately the Convention of the Highlands and Islands in early October will be a forum where we want to rehearse that in a more public domain. So 2 things out of that. First is Friday, the Highland Board, the Highland CPP Board will meet. I would be astonished if the energy crisis is not the most dominant topic in that meeting. And then from that, we will have the Regional Economic Partnership and also Convention of the Highlands and Islands. And by the time we get to early October, I hope that we have a proposition or an agreed position that everybody is signed up to, and we will all be on the same page at the same time. So that was my Highland CPP update. Has anybody got any questions on that they want to take up just now. Okay, so we will, in that case, move on to the Caithness Poverty Action Group, which, Alan, I think, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, certainly, Ian. Be glad to. Yeah, Caithness Poverty Action Group. So obviously looking at the main work is around the cost of living crisis. Group continues to meet monthly, and in between meetings, a number of people are moving things forward. So obviously we're waiting to hear, everybody's waiting to hear what the announcements are over the next couple of days. But even at current prices, I think it's worth outlining that the situation is still very worrying. Yeah. Like heating oil is £1 a litre, roughly, near enough. Just been told yesterday that a bag of coal has went up by £10, so that the cost of one bag of coal is now ranging between £32 and £37. That's just incredible. Yeah. Current cap, gas and electric prices are double what they were last year. So as well as that, we're seeing significant food price increases in the supermarkets. Everybody's seeing that. So clearly people are concerned about how they will cope this winter, even if there is support coming. So I've just outlined just some of the actions that the group are taking. We're working a lot at the moment with the food bank to build up the network of organisations and individuals that can refer to them. Basically, we want everyone that deals with the public in any form to be able to refer to the food bank. And also, of course, the citizens' voice as well. So we're working on that. We're getting ready to launch a campaign to encourage more donations to existing sharing sheds that we've got in the county. And we're also looking to support areas such as Castletown to have a shed of their own, if that's what they want. We're working on arranging advice roadshows around income maximisation in accessible venues such as supermarkets. There's been school uniform swaps have taken place in the last couple of months as the schools went back. We're looking at options around warm hubs. I've spoken to High Life Highland in relation to the libraries, which are to a certain extent the obvious ones in Wick and Thurso. So that work carries on. Stephanie in particular is working with the schools to see what help they need and what support we can provide as a community to them, to see them. Some schools are getting signed up as referral agents for the food bank. Other schools are looking to get somebody from CAB perhaps to come in and speak to the parents. So there's different options for different schools, but again, we're working on that. So that's just some of the things that we're working through. As well as the group, it's clear that organisations throughout the county are trying to support people as we would expect from the voluntary sector. Just a few examples. I spoke to a lady last week who set up a lunch club, a new lunch club in Scots Calder. The Baptist Church are looking to get a soup kitchen set up in Wick. PPP have family meals now most evenings. So, there is things happening. I had a very interesting chat with Jackie Dodds from the Fishermen's Mission this morning. They can support fishermen who are in need. So we will work with her to, to promote her and to make sure that everything's joined together. As we go forward, as well as individual groups, we'll have Here for Caithness will advertise what support is available over the winter. So, plenty of challenges, but plenty of work going on. We had there was a meeting with wind farm developers to see what support they can provide. That was a week or so ago. So I think that discussion went quite well, and there's further meetings to be held there. So we'll see how that goes as well. So lots of things getting worked through at the moment.
Yeah, and you are getting through a power of work there, Alan. So that's a really good snapshot. But it underestimates the power of work that Alan's doing there, and others. But
no, I definitely and others. But Brian Dodd starts on Monday, I'm glad to say. So so that you know, we'll get him. I think he's quite switched on anyway. I've heard great reports about him. So we'll get him straight on to probably out to Castletown to help with them, get their food shed set up and so on. So yeah, there's a lot happening anyway. That's the important thing as well. It's not just what the group are doing. There's groups out there that are identifying the issues and seeing what they can do as well, and we can support them. Then that's good. Absolutely, and some of that cohesion has been helped by what we learned during COVID in terms of resilience and the networking approach. So we're not starting my blank sheet of paper this time, but I suspect it's going to be at least as challenging as it was 2.5 years ago, just maybe for slightly different reasons. Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, Alan. Has anybody got any questions, comments for Alan? No, not seeing hands going up. Oh, Ron and Rosemary. Ron first and then Rosemary.
Yeah, thanks very much, Alan. I was just wondering what your thoughts were on this. I was at a meeting, I can't remember which meeting it was, and the number of kitchens that are in our area, in the Highland area, you know, like school kitchens, youth club kitchens and all that. And is there any thought at all about, I mean, they're going to be cooking meals for the kids at school, but maybe extending the meals a wee bit for OEPs or people that need food? You know, when the kitchens are on sort of thing, they're cooking. So yeah. Is there any thought at all extending that kind of work, or is that too involved?
It's possible, I'm sure, Ron. I suppose that comes down to education and budgets, and that's where it could all sink quite drastically, because I think it was pretty difficult even during COVID sometimes to get used to kitchens and so on. Like certainly, I'll give you an example. Is Keith School, they obviously have got their cook and they do food for the kids at lunchtime, and they're now going to be using that waste, what previously would have been waste, food that would have been possibly thrown out, and they're going to try to reuse that food. And even, I know there's been some discussions, I think Joan, possibly you were involved in that, but I think the last I heard that they were potentially just going to put that out to parents to say that there will be frozen food available, meals that they can put out at weekends with the kids, you know. So there is options, and if Keith can do that, then the other schools, there must be a lot of waste, I would have thought. So that's something that we could work on. It's I suppose, Ron, it's around buildings and use of buildings, and the cost. Then who's going to pick up the cost? So, yeah. But yeah, it's something we'll certainly consider. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. It's just I thought they were on anyway. It's just like staying a little longer, you know. But it's probably more complicated than that.
No,
yeah.
It's a good thought.
I'll just add to that as well, is that we tried during COVID, Ron. That's why we ended up using youth club kitchen, was we couldn't get the use of the school kitchens, but understood that was due to COVID. But yeah, we were part of that conversation around Keith, and it was about trying to get, and I think maybe Bower School as well, about trying to get the food waste to the community larders, but it's too far for our shearing shed that, you know, they kind of come to us. So is there a solution that's somewhere in between? But it's something that we're going to do, trying to work with it. You know, if we can get waste from the schools, then we can, like, we take waste currently from North Highland College, but there are other things that are going on in terms of meals for older folk, and like we're going to increase our seniors' lunches and things like that as well. So you can get your volunteer hat on for that, Rob, because I know you're very helpful with it.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Joan, and thanks, Ron. Rosemary.
Yeah, as an organisation, I think we have real concerns about families who have babies and under twos at home. They're very isolated. They're very much on their own. They can't access any nurseries, and they can't access any creche facilities and that kind of thing. So I think what we're considering is if we could get some funding to just have our groups, you know, have them attend our groups more, maybe around lunchtime, providing a meal, just somewhere for them to go and just to share how they're feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. Are you? So is that's something obviously you're actively pursuing, Rosemary?
Yes, we are considering it, definitely. Yeah.
Good. Okay.
The Coastal Communities Fund is opening in a couple of weeks, apparently, for expressions of interest as well. That might be of interest to a number of people in the call. I can't remember. It's definitely in September. I think it was 2 weeks, Monday past. It should be open for expressions of interest. So I think that was, councillor friends will keep me right, but I think there was approximately 400,000 in that pot, unless they've dabbled in it already. I don't know. Up even now. Well, that's all the better.
Yeah, I received an email to say that it's on the 19th, Alan.
19th, that's good then, yeah.
And on a much smaller scale, I think, Alan, you and I both had a message this morning from Kevin Ditcham from Police Scotland about some of their funding approaches. Yeah,
I think it's 32,000 in that pot for groups to come up to £3,000. So that's open as well. They'll just watch social media, and that'll be on the go next couple of days as well. Yeah. So there's options out there, and I see so just need to move quite quick. It's getting colder.
Yeah, absolutely, so, absolutely. No, thank you, and thanks, Rosemary. Alexander.
Yes, continuing on for June, we're seeing the community cafe does something similar as well. There's a bi-monthly event. There's something called Soul Food, which is basically cooking on a limited budget, and a meal for the older users as well. And the kitchen here was recently refitted with Highland Council money, so I forget what term it is. It's commercially designated, commercially verified, whatever that term is, and we're also looking at that Police Scotland, Police Caithness money as well, so that going out and linking it to warm pumps as well.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks, Alexander. Okay, I don't see any other hands up, so I think thank you, Alan, for that update, and we will go on to Caithness Cares, and I think that's you, Julie.
It certainly is. Hi. So yeah, the Caithness Cares meetings, at the last meeting, we decided to move them to quarterly. When the plan was first handed over back in June last year, it was decided that the meetings would be quarterly anyway, but as a group we decided that because of the momentum that was building, we wanted to meet monthly. So we are now quarterly, which is good, and that reflects the fact that there's so much work going on in other groups that are representing the top priorities. So I'll just run through a very short update on the priorities that we have. So there are 19 points in the action plan, and at any time we review the plan, but we also look at the top 5. So that's what we call the red section, and that's the focus, the main focus of the group. And typically the amber section is where things are being worked out and progressing anyway. So the first thing I'll just give a brief update on is Planet Youth. So the surveys have been collated. The first stage of the priorities are now agreed. And the top 5 priorities are around different things, but relating to increasing the number and range of activities for young people and families, and having those connections and building relationships, and giving them opportunities to try things that maybe they've not before. And then there's a bit of work there about looking at the attitudes towards alcohol in families and at raffles and things like that. So those coalition meetings will be monthly. And again, if anybody is interested in being involved with that, then they can contact Eve McLeod. Next is the Recovery College, and that's led by Centred, formerly Birchwood Highland. The main priority or the purpose of the Recovery College is to build connections and belonging between people. So they've just recently agreed their foundational document, and again, that's available. If anybody wants that, I can forward it on. They've recently finished the training for their peer-to-peer support workers, and their graduation ceremony is in, well, this month, the 17th of September in Inverness, Kingsmills. And again, any support, any words of encouragement would be really welcome. It's a great achievement for the first recruits that are going to go on to act in a voluntary capacity, but there's opportunities there, if funding allows, that they'll be able to go on and find paid work in that capacity. And then the Drug and Alcohol Forum, again, these meetings have started back, resumed regular meetings. And in the last meeting, there was a note of interest from the recovery community. They were quite keen to recruit a person to take forward some of the work. So they'll work with the Drug and Alcohol Forum, but that will be shaped by the recovery community, what that looks like, what that person will be doing, and I'll feed back again at another meeting. One of the other priorities is around skills development, and again that fits in nicely with some of the things that have already been discussed today. So we've got a new employability subgroup. We've been doing a lot of mapping in that, so there's so many people involved with employability, and it's felt really disconnected for a while. So it's getting people together and looking at who does what when, what the referral stages are, or the partnerships. And at the last meeting, again, we had the final, I think it is the final up-to-date mapping document, which is just really filling in the gaps. So we think we have the groups that are involved in it, so whether that's mentoring, work experience, all these kind of things, but it's looking at those finer details. So who is responsible, or how can we contact, or who decides, what school decides to go with what programme, those kind of things. One of the really interesting things from that last meeting was we were hearing about the Highland Council My Future, My Success plan, and this is around building strength around mentoring, just really building on the schemes that are involved in mentoring or upskilling, expanding training, skills, learning, working with partners such as UHI to deliver vocational and formal qualifications, developing modern apprenticeships. But I'm sure that at a future meeting we'll have more information about that. That's Tracy Anderson, who will be leading on that locally. And again, I'm sure she'll have an update at a future meeting. And then the final priority action is around access to support. That is something that, again, is, you know, when you do community surveys, it's about we need access to services in good time, nearby. So we have two really good centres in Caithness. We've got Stepping Stones and Haven, known as Caithness Mental Health Support Group. And really, there's a lot of interest in looking at expanding on what they already offer. So we've brought in Centred, Scottish Recovery Network, the Joshi Project, and these groups are working together and discussing how things can progress to offer that service. So it might not look like 24/7 at the moment, but since the plan was, well, since I don't know when the plan was handed over, June last year, already we've seen a number of new telephone lines that offer 24/7 support. But there's the Couth app for young people that they can have counselling. So it's still not where I think a lot of the community would like it to be in terms of 24/7 with beds and things like that. That's still on the table for discussion, but there's movement in that direction of early intervention, having conversation cafes and recovery cafe. And I think it's just good to have, at this point, to have those partners working together and looking at what can be achieved with different partners. Just adding on a little bit to what Alan mentioned about local support. So this is not directly Caithness Cares, but it does incorporate Caithness Cares and the Caithness Poverty Action Group. And that is that obviously we're coming into the winter months and people are already really worrying. We know food is going to be something that's really important. So I've created a document that we'll send out, and this is just looking at a plan where we can all work together and make sure that we have a really simple way of people finding out information about what is available. So if you're offering food that week, if you're a church that are offering a meal that particular week, a group of residents or whatever it is, and you want information to get out to the community really quickly, we're looking at a plan. So when you get the plan, we'll circulate it through the partnership, but it is a draft. It has to work for everybody, or as many people as we possibly can. So if I can get your feedback on that, that would be really great, and be happy to tweak it to make sure it is really efficient, and the people that need support in an emergency crisis situation, then we will definitely hopefully be in a good position to know how we can reach them quickly. I think that's all for the Caithness Cares. If anyone has any questions.
That's really good. Thanks. Brilliant. Thanks, Julie. And particularly that last one on just trying to kind of coordinate data on what's happening and who's doing what. That's fantastic. Yeah. Any questions from anybody on what Julie's just said? No. Okay. Well, the next one on the agenda is the Caithness Employability, the LEP, and it's you, Andrea, and then Julie back on to talk about the Child's Plan. At least I think Andrea's. Yes, you are on, Andrea.
I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the camera's working. Can you see me?
No, we can't.
Yeah, I'm having problems with Teams today anyway. But I'm here, so I'll have to do. I'm afraid.
No, that's fine. We can hear you, so that's fine.
My face anyway. Yeah. So just a quick update. Julie's pretty much covered more or less everything that I was going to say anyway. We're at a stage where we've got our mapping done, and it's just a case of getting the finer details filled in. And the plan will then be to meet after the North Highland Lake group has met, which is the larger, kind of statutory group. Yep. And they will give us hopefully some smaller actions that they don't have the capacity to do, and we'll hopefully have the capacity to do them basically. The overall aim will be to get this mapping document set up so that everyone knows what is where, but also tidy up some of the loose ends, like looking at transport and looking at whether there's issues with access to interview clothing, interview skills, whatever. We've also asked for feedback from all the agencies on what the clients or the people they're dealing with are actually wanting. Because there's obviously a concern that we'll go off on a completely wrong tangent, and there's issues out there that we don't know about. So we have asked for feedback directly from some of the people that they're dealing with. So hopefully when we get that, we can also look at if there's any actions we can do along those lines.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. And just in terms of the feedback bit, and I think I'm right in thinking that the Chamber of Commerce is involved in what you're talking about as well, aren't they?
Yeah, I've got to get in touch with Trudy. That's on my to-do list as well. She's been in contact. So yeah, that's
because I think through the Developing the Young Workforce program that the Chamber have been running for the last number of years, that sort of practical consideration tends to be where they end up every time they go around this question is the practicalities of why people are either not turning up to interview, or when they do turn up, they're not prepared. So that's a really good addition to the equation. Okay, thanks, Andrea. Julie, back to you to talk about the Child's Plan.
Okay, so for those of you that were part of this process sort of about 3 years ago, you'll remember, I think the last meeting we had around the Child's Plan, certainly from a community perspective, was towards the end of 2019. And as far as I can make out, I don't think the plan has been reviewed since that point. So we had a first meeting this week to do that. And we went through bit by bit, and it was really about who is responsible for each of those sections. Some of the activities, particularly the community side, is already underway, so that's fairly straightforward. We looked at the issue with childminders. That was another issue that was raised, I think, by Rosemary in that meeting, and the importance to make sure that there's something in there that is very focused around the first 1001 days. This is really important, and a really important time for children's emotional, physical well-being, and we're quite keen as a group to just make sure that that is included in the plan. There's a takeaway document that we were given to work on. And I think the next meeting will take place after the October holidays, but I can see that they'll be quite frequent for the next few months until we have the document that has been agreed. Helen Ellis, who's an educational support officer, is going to take the lead, and I think from future meetings she'll be giving the updates. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. And I'll open it up to questions in a minute. I mean, for me, that was if there was a blockage, that's probably the wrong word, but I'll use it anyway. If there was a blockage to making progress on the child's plan, it was identifying who that point of accountability was. So if we now have that, then that's really good news, because it does give us the potential to start making progress. And when I say we, I mean we, the partners, rather than we as either Caithness Cares or any other individual entity. Rosemary.
Yes, I thought it was a positive meeting. I thought it was well led. I thought that it was interesting that education were represented very well there, but there was nobody perhaps from social work. There was somebody from the family team. This is probably going to be my last meeting, as I'm retiring at the end of the month, and my successor will be Fiona Carlisle, who has joined us already. I just want to speak on behalf of Home Start, but all early year providers. Caithness needs to really look at what's happening to their babies and children, that they're not removed from the county, that they can stay with their families, their extended families. And we need to treat people much more compassionately. We need to treat people with much more kindness. And there's easy ways of doing it. It's not hard, but we need to change the language that we're speaking to people. We need to understand clearly what their trauma has been and why they're struggling to parent. It's not because they don't want to. It's not because they don't want to be good parents. It's because they don't have the capacity at times. And much more support needs to be put around that, much more funding. And it's not a huge amount of funding that needs to be there that would make a massive difference to these children and families that we all know then will not be the difficult children in primary 1, in primary 6, at teenage years, because they haven't been nurtured properly. So thank you.
Thanks, Rosemary. And do you feel that the direction of travel with the child's plan will enable that to happen?
I think it could, but I think it's very slow, like all of these things. I think radical action needs to be taken. We can't keep waiting. You know, I had a comment at a meeting a few years ago in PPP, and somebody said, well, the children that are excluded from school, you just look at the register 60 years ago of those children at high school, they were the same families that are excluded. I've said this before. And, you know, until society recognises that inequalities are absolutely massive around education, until society realises that the mental health and well-being of children is established very early on. It can be changed when they're older, but the empathy, the understanding that children get, the bonding, everything is in those first 1001 days. And we're all responsible as a society for that. You know, all children, in my eyes, have potential to reach their full potential, but we're not caring enough about that. Okay.
Yep, absolutely. I hear what you're saying. And I suppose I should say happy retirement, but we will miss you when you're not here, basically. So yeah. Good luck to your successor, but we will miss you when you're not here.
Well, I have promised that I will probably have a bit of time out, and then I'll be another rebel with the cause.
Excellent. You do realise that this meeting is being recorded, so that is now on the record, and we know where you live. So yeah, good. Thanks, Rosemary. Right, Gail. There is, and for those of you that aren't aware, there is an ongoing Caithness community catch-up, which was, I suppose, a successor to the resilience group calls that that were running during COVID, and which Gail has been coordinating recently. Next one, Gail, do you want to briefly mention it, because it's an opportunity? Well, we're not sure yet, but we think it's an opportunity to have Debbie Murray, the principal of the college, come in and talk a little bit about the merger that's going on within UHI of the three college entities.
Yeah, I've invited Debbie. I haven't had a confirmation yet if she's able to attend on the 28th, but it was just to share the date and the time with everybody, and I'll get the Teams link circulated. Like Ian said, hoping to have Debbie along. If not, maybe one of our staff. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll chase it up. And if she can make it, she can make it. If she can't, you know, we'll have our usual kind of round table, informal, you know, tea and chat. I mean, we all have to make our own tea, but that's fine.
Just to say that I was able to take part in a session with Debbie and the other three college principals in Lewes Castle College in Western Isles and West Highland College, and it was really quite enlightening. So that process is something we should all be aware of and responding to, because there's a consultation live at the moment. And if you haven't had an opportunity to respond to that consultation, maybe we could circulate the link to that as well. Okay. I'm not seeing any hands going up. So has anybody got any other business they would like to cover off just now?
Just mentioning consultations there, Ian, maybe just a reminder that the Highland Council Let's Talk funding consultations out there, and the date's been extended for another few days. So just encourage people to look that up and complete it.
Okay. Thanks, Gail. Got a couple of hands up. We've got several hands up now. Alan, you're first.
Thanks, Ian. Just a quick point. COVID vaccine boosters. I think it's reported in the GROW website today, and I heard a few people speak about it the last couple of days, that patients from WIC, and we're speaking about, I think, over 75s here, are getting invites to go out to Caithness. Oh, yeah. I'm not sure. Poor Naomi, I don't know, are you the only one from NHS here? But something needs to get a grip again on this. It's just not suitable for over 75 with no transport to get out to Caithness at 5 o'clock at night or whatever. So I think it's certainly not coming. It's not even coming from NHS Highland. I think it's coming from NHS Scotland or whatever. So
it happened the last time. A lot of people were getting directed down to Brora and even Inverness. And you're right, it wasn't an NHS Highland thing. It was coming from whichever centre. Naomi, I don't know if you've got any more information than anybody else at the moment.
I haven't, I'm afraid. I'm not involved, but I do have the contact details for the person who's in charge of vaccinations, and they're holding a meeting today. So if you, Alan, if you could send me the information, I'll try. I think the meeting is about 12:30. I'll link into it.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
I'm on the case now then. Right. Thanks.
Excellent. Good timing, Alan, as always. Okay, Matthew.
Yeah, just to briefly touch on what Alan had mentioned there about the Your Police You Decide funding that's come up. So just to confirm, it's open as of yesterday, and it'll be open through till the end of October time. And as I'd said, it's £32,000 that looking to be spent. It's quite a broad topic, so it's including safety and well-being and poverty and inequality. So obviously something that's been quite prevalent in the last in this meeting today. So I've put a link to the project information just on the chat there. So if anyone wants to have a look, they can do that.
Good, excellent. Thanks for that. And we've got, it's Alexander, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a wee request. If anybody has access to wool, a group of Ukrainian women are knitting socks and gloves for the lads back home at Community Cafe. And specifically what they're looking for, I think it's for military socks and gloves. And it's 70 to 80% wool and 20 to 30% nylon. That's a quality that they're looking for. If anybody can direct to either donations or where to purchase some, Very good.
Okay, thanks, Alexander. Right, I think that's us. No other hands up. One other thing for me, we've got the next date in the diary. It's the 6th of December. My current thinking is that we will still be dominated by the energy crisis at that point, and the cost of living generally. So I suspect that our agenda will be constructed around that, but we'll keep you informed over the next couple of weeks, because as I said earlier, we are going to go through a series of opportunities over the next few weeks to have that expressed at regional and national level. So anything we get back from that, we'll feed back to this group. So if you don't hear it from other sources, at least you'll hear it from the CPP. Okay. Sorry, Jan, you've got your hand up. You're still on mute, Jan.
I just want to apologise. I've had a lot of IT problems today, getting in and out with the weather. But the first two presentations were really, really good. And Alan, thank you about for the poverty update as well, which is ongoing with the fuel crisis and the food crisis and everything. I'm just going to make a little comment about that. But the fuel crisis and the food crisis, we might actually get to net zero emissions because nobody will be eating or eating, you know,
unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences of the situations we're all in. But thanks very much for the presentations. And I do know I was in a meeting with the director of the Thurso College, and they have plans to do a course on the skills that will be needed up here for the renewable energies. So, you know, so she'll likely maybe speak more on that, but they are planning doing a course on, getting together a course on what we need, the skills we'll need up here for the to help us get to net zero emissions. But thanks everybody for the participation. Great. I'm sorry I couldn't participate more.
Quite all right. Quite all right. That's great. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, it's just very quickly on the vaccinations. We got, it must be over 65s. We got a letter to say that we can go to the Legion 19th September for flu and COVID. So they must be dealing with a younger, if that's the right word, younger age group as well. So yeah, we can manage to get the Legion. We don't need to change that one anyway.
I'm not going to offer any comment at all on that, Ron. Thanks very much. Yeah, no, that's good. And I think it just seems to be a glitch in the system that some people are being sent elsewhere. Okay.
I got mine, so.
Who said that?
Well, I'm going to the assembly rooms.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So both Wick and Thurso do seem to have local venues for it. So there is a glitch in the system somewhere, it looks like. And for those of you who are not looking at the chat bar, Kirstine has just let everybody know that Let's Get On With It together are back to face-to-face groups. So worth keeping an eye on that in press and social media. So thanks, Kirstine, for that. Okay, I think that's us. So thanks very much for your time this morning. We did bring it in under 2 hours, and hopefully we've got what we need out of it. We'll keep you up to speed over the next few weeks, as I said, and hopefully speak to you before December, basically. So thanks very much, everybody, and have a safe rest of the day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Trio. Thanks, folks.